Well, hey kids, and welcome to another episode of Sunday School Virtually. It's me, Sarah Tate, your Sunday School teacher, and I'm very excited to share another story from the Bible with you guys. So I hope everybody is doing good and you guys are staying safe and everyone is listening to their mommy and daddies because it's very important and kind of reminds me of this lesson today. So I'm going to talk to you about, first about a lady. This was way back in the Old Testament of the Bible, and this woman's name was Hannah. Can you guys say Hannah? Maybe you know somebody named Hannah. Well, Hannah was a very important person in the Bible. She was kind of sad in the beginning of the story because guess what? She was kind of getting older and God didn't give her any children. So she was kind of lonely. She just had her husband and she was pretty sad. She really wanted a baby. So one day she goes to the temple and she tells God. She's praying so hard and she's praying like never before, and she says, God, please, pretty please, will you give me a baby? And guess who hears her? A priest named Eli. So Eli the priest comes up to her and he says, lady, is everything okay? Because the way you're praying makes it sound like everything is not okay. So then Hannah says to Eli, she says, sir, you don't understand. I've been wanting a baby for so long and I'm just praying and praying to God. Please, God, if you give me a baby, I promise I'm going to give this baby back to you so that this baby can serve in God's temple and this baby will be dedicated to the Lord. Wow, that must have been a pretty difficult prayer for Hannah to pray because she wanted the baby so bad for herself, but she wanted this baby so badly that she was willing to give this baby back to God. So that was a pretty selfless prayer. Anyways, fast forward to a couple of years later, guess what happened? Hannah was blessed with a beautiful baby boy, and his name was Samuel. That's right. So baby Samuel stayed with his mom for just a few years, and then guess what Hannah did? She kept her promise to God and she brought baby Samuel back to the temple where priest Eli was. And Hannah goes up to Eli and she says, hey, do you remember me from a couple years ago? I came here and I was praying to God that he would give me a baby, and now look, here's my baby. Oh, I forgot to show you guys pictures. Here was Hannah praying, and Eli, that's Eli over here. And then finally, look, Samuel shows up. He was just a little boy. He probably wasn't much older than you guys, maybe around your age. Can you imagine that your parents prayed for you, and then when you were born and maybe just a few years old, they decided that they wanted you to serve in the church with the pastor? Wow, that's a pretty big job though. And very important. And guess what? Samuel did his job so well. He was so obedient and he listened to everything Eli told him to do. And he was very helpful in the temple, and he was doing everything like a good little boy. And here's Samuel's mom, Hannah, and she just left him and she prayed, but guess what Eli said? Hannah, don't worry. God will bless you with more children. And she ended up having more children. But here was little Samuel. He stayed with Eli, and his mommy came and visited him every year that they went to go pray and make a sacrifice to God. Look, he even got a special little robe from his mom. His mom didn't forget about him. She prayed for him every day, and she still loved Samuel very much. But Samuel had an even more important job to do. he was going to be God's servant. So, guess what happened to baby Samuel? He grew up a little bit older, and he was sleeping in the tabernacle one day. And he started to fall asleep, and he was falling asleep, and all of a sudden he started to hear something.
Samuel!
Whoa, who was that? Wait a minute, it's just me and Eli here tonight. It's probably Eli. He's probably calling me. So Samuel runs over to Eli's bedroom and he says, Eli, here I am. You called me? And Eli wakes up in the middle of his sleep and he's like, Samuel, it's 3 a.m. No, I'm not calling you. Go back to bed. So Samuel scurries back to the tabernacle and he goes back to sleep and he's drifting off to sleep.
Samuel!
Okay, I don't think I'm crazy. I know it's the middle of the night, but I know someone's calling me. So Samuel runs back to Eli's bedroom and he wakes up Eli and he's like, oh man, he's probably gonna be really mad at me because I keep waking him up. He's like, Eli. And Eli wakes up and he's like, Samuel, what is it? And Samuel's like, here I am, you called me. And Eli was like, no, I didn't call you, Samuel, you must be dreaming. Go back to sleep. So Samuel runs back to the tabernacle where he was sleeping, and he goes back to sleep, and as soon as
Samuel!
Okay, something fishy is going on around here. Samuel goes and runs back to Eli's bedroom, and he wakes up Eli again, and he says, Eli, I'm pretty sure you called me this time. And guess what Eli says? Wait a minute. This is the 3rd time you're waking me up, and you think I'm calling you, but I'm not calling you. So Eli starts to think for a second. Wait a minute. What if God is calling you, Samuel? Well, you see, kids, this is something very important because back in this time, God didn't really talk to a lot of people, so they were not familiar with what it sounds like for God to be calling them. So Eli realized this must be God calling you, Samuel. So what did he tell Samuel to do? Samuel, now you have to do something very important. You have to go back to your bed, and the next time you hear your name, don't come running to my bedroom. Just stay in bed and says, yes, Lord, here I am. Your servant is listening. And it's probably God calling you, and maybe he has to tell you something very important. So, guess what Samuel does again? He runs back to the tabernacle where he was sleeping, and he goes back to sleep, and when he starts to fall asleep...
Samuel!
Okay. I know this isn't Eli this time, so I'm just going to listen to what Eli says. And Samuel replies, yes, Lord, your servant is listening. And guess what happened? God starts to speak to Samuel. And he had some very important things to tell Samuel. So kids, this lesson is very important because it shows us how Samuel was dedicated to the Lord and he was called for a very special purpose. So even though it was difficult for Samuel's mommy, Hannah, to make sure that he's dedicated to the Lord and goes back to the temple and serves in the temple, God had a way bigger plan for Samuel. He wasn't meant to stay with his mom and dad and grow up with his siblings. He was meant to serve the Lord because God had a very special plan to be his prophet. That means God needed to tell him some very important lessons or stories, or he had to tell him some very important messages to speak to the people of God. That's a really incredible story, so I hope you guys learned something from it. And I hope everybody is staying safe and you guys are all having a great time learning about God's Word. And I really hope everyone sends in their memory verse because I am looking forward to seeing you learning Psalms 23. And I'm keeping you guys in prayer, and I hope everybody's doing good and staying safe. We'll see you next week. I love you. Bye-bye.